So this is Paho. For those of you, I expect most of you know about it, but Paho is a collection of components for MQTT. The main components of the MQTT client libraries in different languages. We've just had a .NET client contributed to Paho. I'm responsible for most of the C stuff, so if you don't like it, then you blame me. Hopefully, we've had some good reports on it, so I don't think it's all bad. We've got some Java client, which is possibly the main focus of the highest profile, I guess I might say. And then we have some other clients which are JavaScript client, which was developed by IBM, but works in a web browser. So it isn't the one that you use for Node.js. We've tried to get that contributed to Paho, but haven't quite succeeded with that yet. And then some smaller niche clients. One for Lua, which is still in the infancy stage, so it's not mature. Go one is written by a colleague of mine at IBM, and that's pretty good. We also have some MQTT tools. Some conformance tests, or I put it in inverted commas because conformance is quite a strong word. And so hopefully, I hope that in time they'll become conformance tests. For the moment, I'm doing the best I can on an ad hoc basis to put tests together that will allow people to easily validate their MQTT implementations on both the client and server side. I'm using some model-based testing approaches from the MQTT specification. That's an approach which has interested me for a long time, and I'm hoping it's going to pan out. We also have some various GUIs for MQTT visualizations, including an Eclipse view. The Eclipse view hasn't been updated for a while, so I have to try and find somebody to carry on with that work. I think that was contributed by Eurotech in the beginning. We also have some MQTT-SN tools, starting MQTT-SN tools. For those of you who know MQTT works over TCP. MQTT-SN is the derivative or related protocol of MQTT, which is intended to work over other protocols like UDP, ZigBee, just about anything. So I've written an embedded C client, which is pretty complete at the moment. And then I've just recently had some contributions from IBM Zurich that were written at the time that the MQTT-SN specification was devised in 2008. So there's a Java gateway in that, which converts from MQTT-SN to MQTT and a Java client.
So is there a plan to bring that at Oasis, like as an extension of MQTT or as a separate specification?
There's people would like that, but the MQTT specification has only just been standardized.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of improvements that people would like to see in MQTT. So the only drawback of trying to incorporate all of these is that there's so many updates that the next stage might take several years if we try to do all of this at once. Yeah. And if you look at the same, MQTT took 10 years, or more than 10 years, from its inception to standardization. So if we took the same time scale for MQTT-SN, then we'd be thinking of another 5 years or so before it was mature enough that we'd think about that. But on the other hand, people want standardized specifications, so it's swings and roundabouts, we're not quite sure. But anybody who wants to participate in that discussion is welcome to go along and participate in the Oasis work group. So the project stats from Paho, we have 74 downloads from the official download stats, but that doesn't include various other means of getting stuff from Paho, including the Maven repos for Java client, and the embedded client is only available in source code at the moment. We've had 13 contributors in the last 3 months, including our new guy, Paolo, who's donated his .NET client, and we have a whole bunch of bugs, which only 81 of those are unresolved at the moment, which I'm told having a large number of bugs is a good thing, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So, yeah, there's plenty of bugs raised by the community. We graduated in June, simultaneous release with Luna, and the ongoing work we've got coming up, still developing the MQTT test suite. There's more work on the embedded clients for MQTT, more work on MQTTSN embedded clients, including gateways, embedded gateways, and tools for MQTTSN. So the very low-level clients that I've produced at the moment for the embedded work for MQTTSN, those clients can be linked together and used in higher-level tools like a gateway and visualization. So I've created the lowest level layer and I'm building on top of that for higher-level tools. And that's going to come out in the next year or two. Obviously, at the moment, most of that work is done by myself, so I've had a few contributions from the community, but if anybody would like to get involved in that, you're all welcome. You've got an Android service based on a Java client, and at the moment I'm working with some guys in IBM on that, debating how we should move forward. There's some debate on how we would best design that to work for Android. And this is an interesting one to me, that the clients are written by IBM, the client libraries are written by IBM. We've got this mode of working where if you're not connected to a server, then we don't allow you to publish a message, which means that you don't have to worry about or manage messages which are persisted to disk to be sent later. So you don't have to worry about things like, cases like, you send a message and you've never connected to a server, you never know whether that message is going to get there. So if you provide these sorts of facilities, it's offline buffering as we call it, then you have to manage messages which never reach their intended destination. Many of the client libraries that are written by contributors have this feature in there. So this seems like something that's really important for people in the community in general, but IBM has shied away from it. So for the IBM clients, I want to add that sort of feature so that we get in sync with all the other clients that are being contributed.
So back to the test suite, is there, as part of the test suite, anything related to performance and load testing of brokers and stuff like that? Like I know there is some code from telemetry on GitHub that does that. I think it's in Scala actually.
Okay.
But is there something similar as part of the test suite?
No.
Would that make sense to have that kind of tools?
That wasn't.
Yeah, it's not for interoperability.
Load testing is not part of that.
Yeah.
There is a load testing plugin for Apache JMeter
Yeah.
that's been contributed. It hasn't been. It's not been maintained since it was contributed, so I haven't used that myself. But the focus of the MQTT tests to start with was making sure that the conformance with the specifications was completed. In particular, things like one of the important scenarios is when you break a connection, then you re-establish it, and then to make sure that messages aren't missing or duplicated for QoS 1 or 2, that sort of level of detail. And then load testing would be a different thing. Maybe at some point in the future, if that was.
One comment on the last of the offline buffering that you want to connect.
Yes.
We have both of these in Pura over how.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a good point of conversation there. Take a look at what was done there.
It is. I've had a look at that, at the design in Cura, and the only thing that I was wondering about was that that's quite a different API model from the one that they used in Paho. And we were thinking, at this level, very simple enhancements to the current API. So people would just say, I've got this API, and I can just, with a few tweaks, I can just add this offline buffering rather than moving to a completely different API. And yours is more comprehensive than the sort that we're envisaging. So I think there's room for both, but we can certainly have a discussion about it. we had I had a discussion a few weeks ago about how we should move forward with Paho, apart from having MQTT clients, because I envisaged that after a relatively short time they might stabilise. I didn't want to be developing MQTT clients forever, and certainly you can only envisage a limited amount of function in those. So Ian suggested a couple of things. Experiment.
Don't blame this on me.
No. I think it's a good thing. So I just asked for a permanent incubator to be created, and I haven't finished all filling in the forms yet because I wanted to make sure that we had the right sort of projects in there. So two of the suggestions, I think these are good suggestions. It was just the easiest way to put them up there. It took a discussion from your emails. The MQTT specification is going to develop over the next couple of years within the remit of Oasis, and so people, if they want to experiment with implementations, then we can use the Paho permanent incubator for that. Tools to, I really like this one. Focus on creating tools to test, debug and deploy MQTT applications, because that could be critical to the ease of use of MQTTs. Things like being able to see what packets are being sent between the client and server when you're developing an application, making sure it all looks like the sort of scenarios that you expected. Again, the Paho permanent incubator can be used for tools, experimental tools. The incubator can be used for any component that isn't mature yet, because we have graduated. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about this on the next slide when I come to our challenges. Julian said about the MQTT embedded security story, and I agree with that. We have used TLS with the embedded client in the embed environment. The major problem I had with that was that the embed community were using Wolf SSL as the TLS library, and that has a GPL license, so it meant that we couldn't distribute source code with that. But there are other TLS libraries that have a more friendly license, like AX TLS was the one that Julian mentioned, so we could have a look at that for both TCP and for UDP. And device management for the MQTT, lots of people have talked about that, so we'll definitely be having a look at that. At the moment, my key challenges are within IBM, we contributed to the IBM Java client, but people have moved on, so I'm having to try and find a real owner for that. We have piecemeal fixes going in, but I have to keep a close eye on what's going on. So that's my problem. But if anybody else outside Paho wanted to step in and take it on, then that would be very welcome. I'm struggling in my own mind how to organise releases, because unlike lots of projects, Paho is a collection of components which are at different stages of maturity. So for those projects or components which are not production ready, which are not ready for a graduated project, then perhaps the permanent incubator is the right place. But I still haven't sorted out how I'm going to manage this.
So when is your next release? Like, do you have a release date? Or
I don't have a fixed date. I'd like to get the Android service and the embedded clients out in a release. But I'm not even sure what that means to the embedded clients, because they're often consumed as source. So it doesn't always make sense. They could be just source zips. But I notionally was thinking about one before I went on vacation in the middle of November, and then one next year for a simultaneous release with Mars. There's a couple of attempts we've had to get other components, other clients contributed. One of the Node.js MQTT client and the Ruby MQTT client. Both of those were currently hosted on GitHub, and both of them wanted to use the GitHub issues database for reporting problems. Currently, we don't allow within Eclipse. Even if projects are allowed to be hosted on GitHub, then we don't. We have to have bugs raised in Eclipse Bugzilla. But I see all good points for that. In fact, the point that was made by these people was that people use the issues system on GitHub, not necessarily for raising or contributing bugs, but for just asking questions. So they wanted to leave those open just so people could use it as a vehicle for asking questions. And that doesn't seem to be counter to the problem of using Bugzilla for actual contributions in Eclipse projects. So I think we could probably work our way around this. The other answer was that in due course, in another year, then there'll be a close integration between the GitHub issues database and Bugzilla. There's some work going on to implement that.
It's just, so who also brought the point of GitHub in sync with Garrett? Yeah, so is this the same kind of thing?
Not really. It's more about the source code. Because it would just be good if all Eclipse source code would be available on GitHub. There was a synchronization in place, but it didn't work for some reason. Because I think the sync on the GitHub side is broken, but Garrett itself comes with a synchronization mechanism, so it could actually push this stuff over. There's a bug which is open since, I don't know, forever, but there seems no activity on it at the moment.
So you guys should probably talk to Denise here. About that one.
Yeah.
So that's just synchronization of the source code from Eclipse to GitHub.
Yeah.
I thought that was working.
Not really, it turns out.
Okay. Collaboration opportunities. Well, one of the things I wanted to do was to try and get client libraries for all the top programming languages. What I'm missing at the moment is, or what we're missing is PHP and Ruby. Node.js is a style of JavaScript. So. Device management, future direction. Yes, we don't. There's several other projects I'd like to see that. And this work on the embedded clients and the MQTT conformance testing. So I have had a number of small contributions, but any help on that would be most welcome. That's it for Paho. Any questions?
One pivot on possible direction is, I know we discussed that on the bug, but try to harmonize the behavior across the different clients, right? So for example, in the managing of the live and managing of the connections, it would be important that if I switch from C++ to Java or back, right, I get the same type of behavior.
So you're talking about the implementation, not the external API?
Yes.
Yes, so absolutely. Any bugs in there? I think you're talking about the recent discussion. Yes, this is a tricky detail of MQTT when you're using pings to keep the session alive, and if you're sending and receiving really long messages, which each of those messages might take longer to send or receive than the keep alive interval. So that means that the client libraries and the brokers have to do some. What was easy before you started sending really large messages becomes a bit more tricky. So absolutely, yes.
Is there any plans to take your JavaScript library and write a jQuery wrapper plugin for it?
Not that I know of. Would that be a good thing? I'm not totally familiar with this area, so.
I was playing around writing a jQuery wrapper for the other day, or when I wrote it, just asked if you guys were.
I don't know it, so would you be open to contributing it?
Yeah.
As well? That'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So are we going to talk about Mosquito too?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So Ian has 2 projects.
Yes, but I'm not the lead on that one. Mosquito, lightweight, can be as small as 30K MQTT server. So the compile option, so you can take out functions if you want the minimum supported level of function. That's what 30K gives you. Normally it's about 120K, something like that. It's been released on mosquito.org until now. It's written in C to me. Mosquito was derived from a server that I wrote in IBM, and it's the open source solution of that. And Roger's done a really great job of that. So we wrote it in C to enable it to run, to be as small as possible. So when I was writing the server in the first place, we were writing it for, I wanted to get an MQTT server running on an Linksys NSL U2, which had 16 meg of RAM. Once you stuck a JVM in it, you weren't left with much room for anything else. So I thought having something within C was a good idea. And it's definitely the case when you can get something as small as 30K, because it brings out into a whole new marketplace. So this is Roger Light, the author of Mosquito. Looks looking pretty happy there. So he's had two, well, I don't say that, unexpected events, but he's had a baby earlier this year, he and his wife. So that's caused a lot of slowdown in the progress of Mosquito. He'd anticipated adding two things to Mosquito outside of Eclipse before bringing it into Eclipse. The two things were WebSocket support and restructuring the internals so that it was easier to add MQTT-SN, that's MQTT over UDP. Both of those things took longer than he thought they were going to take, with the added complication of having a baby around and he has to go and babysit every now and again. And like, so when I talk to him sometimes, then he has to go off and feed the baby or whatever. So most of those things now have been overcome. So he's got a release outside of Eclipse, which has the WebSocket support and which has the internal restructuring. So he's just bringing all of that into Eclipse, and because there's some external libraries, he has to put some CQs in to make sure and have the IP approval for all of those things. So we're just very close to getting a release in Eclipse. He asked me recently, how's that going? Would I be able to help? I said I would, except that I'm going on holiday for a month between the middle of November and the middle of December. So getting a release out within Eclipse during this year, if he wants any help from me, is probably not going to be feasible. So it's going to probably have to wait until the first quarter of 2015. So yeah, we've got IP approval for all of the libraries that Roger is relying on. He said there's a lot to do on the admin website release review side of things. I was hoping not to have to do all of that myself to help him out. But I'd be able to contribute some code as well. But we'll see how that goes. I'm happy to help out, because I've been through the release process with Paho, so I can certainly help him there. So the major things we're going to look at towards adding an MQTT-SN support. I'd like to see that enabled not only over UDP but other protocols as well, or the ability to plug in other protocols and other transports like Zigbee and the like, so it wasn't just restricted to MQTT, so the UDP rather. The other option for that is that we have MQTT-SN gateways, which just translate between one transport and another, between Zigbee and UDP and the like, just MQTT-SN to be plugged into an MQTT SN-enabled Mosquito by having these gateways. But it would be nice to have it in the central server. And Roger said to me he feels the need to add features to compete with HiveMQ, because he's had a few people moving to HiveMQ. One of those was a plugin interface, and the other one, I forgot what it was, but it was one of those things where I felt it was an enterprise feature. Maybe it was HiveMQ. I'll have to check that up. That Mosquito may or may not should aim for, but Roger feels the need to do that, so I guess we will. Our key challenges getting it up and running in Eclipse, and more contributors, I guess. That was one of Roger's stated reasons for bringing Mosquito into Eclipse, was getting contributions from our team. I have to say, my feeling up to now is that he's probably still feels quite a lot of ownership for the code. So allowing contributions there might feel uncomfortable for him, but I'm sure that if there were really good contributions, that he'd be more than welcome. He'd welcome. I certainly would, and I'm hoping to help him out once we're properly in Eclipse as well. And we can formulate a proper plan for release for next year.
Okay.
Okay? Any questions?
About Mosquito?